All right, now we are on week 7, card number 3, and we're talking about the Long March in China. So before we go to the Long March, we're going to have to go back just a little bit in history because everything always links together or connects together. And so we need to look at the Chinese history. So in the very beginning of this century of 1900s, there was the Boxer Rebellion. So let's put that up. And then there were quite a few conflicts, including about 1934 that the Japanese were fighting quite a bit on Chinese soil. So put that up too. So before that, from 1912 to 1939, there was a period of time in Chinese history where for the first time in Chinese history it was no longer one controlled China for the first time in 3,000 years. Instead, there were small states, put that up, with small armies. So big landlords would have, or big areas would be controlled by a small army and by different people who own the land. And so China was really disunified. That means they had broken apart in many ways. And so the leaders, both of the People's Liberation Army, or the people who wanted to have China under a democracy, and the people who wanted it under communism, were starting to fight together to make China one full country again. So now let's go through these terms because they're really important. People who want democracy are like the founding fathers of our country. Democracy means that people decide what the government will do, that people make the decisions about government. And so in a democracy, for the most part, there is the freedom to do what God has told you or what God has placed in your heart to do. So you can become what you want, you can kind of do what you want. There's land ownership. You can pray the way you want to. You can believe in God if you choose to, or not if you choose to. And so there's many, many different freedoms. Communism, on the other side, is the opposite. It's where the government is in complete control and the people are under the government, and the government makes all of the decisions, or the majority of decisions, for the people. So under communism, because they want the government to have full control, they don't want people believing in God. They want people to have no religion so that they can believe in the government. So the government is the one that provides everything. The government is that God-like presence for the people. Also in communism, the people don't get to make decisions about what they're going to do or where they're going to work or where even they're going to live. The government makes all of those decisions for them. It's called centralizing the economy. So, for example, if you're in a democracy and you want to go to the grocery store, you can go to the grocery store. Or if you want to go to a farmer's market or even go to the farmer's field and pick up food, you can. And you have tons and tons of different choices. But in communism, people are assigned to grow field, to grow plants or grow crops, and then they're centralized in the government, and then the government distributes them to the people that they think need it and how much they need it. So the government is completely, as much as they possibly can, be in charge. So that's the basic difference. So in China during this time, there was a struggle between Mao Zedong and Sun Yat-sen, and they struggled until the 1920s, and Sun Yat-sen died in 1925, and then there was a civil war, which the communists won. And then Chiang Kai-shek took over, and we have a whole card about him, so we're going to really go into him and what he was trying to accomplish in China. But during this whole civil war, the Communist Party was losing. Mao was in charge of it. And remember, the Japanese are at war with China. You've got the nationalists and the communists fighting against them. And the communists were starting to lose. And so they took this long march. They were actually retreating from the nationalists. So it looked like the nationalists were winning. And so as they retreated, it took them 370 days of retreat. And they had to go over really tough mountain passes. And they had to walk for 5,600 miles. And the Communist Army was very hungry. It needed provisions. But Mao said, do not take from any of the farmers or the peasants. And so what it did was it really made the farmers and the peasants like this Communist Army. And so it started generating people liking it, wanting to participate in it, wanting to support it instead of the democratic nationalist movement. And so during this long trek, there was one battle called the Luding battle on Luding Bridge, and it was kind of like the Alamo in the United States. You guys remember that from last year, where basically a small amount of people lost to a much greater army, but it caused kind of a folklore to start going, so that people were like, oh, we can overpower the bigger men, we can do this. Unfortunately, the overpowering of the bigger army was the better army, but that's what happened. So basically, this was a time in which the Mao brought his people on a very long trek through very difficult mountain regions, and it was while the Japanese army was fighting them, and the communists eventually took over China, and they got rid of any Christian churches that were there. We have Watchman Nee, that he was put in jail after the communists took for over 20 years, and then he died in jail. There were very, very many Chinese people who died in jail or who were killed because they were believers in Jesus Christ. And so this was a time of China where there was severe oppression. And actually, the communists are still in charge of China today. So we're going to talk about that as we go. But the key points are that Mao was losing, and then after the march, he generated a lot of goodwill, which made the people support him more. The Japanese were fighting against the Chinese at the time, and Mao's army was better at fighting the Japanese than the nationalists were. You have Sun Yat-sen and you have Chiang Kai-shek, who were leaders of the nationalist movement. And in the end, the communists won, and we're really going to go over communism versus socialism versus democracy as we go through these years. So this is kind of the beginning experience in those concepts. Thanks so much.